Hello students, so let us continue our chapter 9 hydrocarbon. Today we will see the theory part 9 and in this we will cover the NCERT section 9.3.3. So this is our disclaimer. The learning objective of today's class will be describing the isomerism in case of alkenes. So we have already seen that alkanes are capable of showing isomerism. Now we will do the same for the alkenes. If I talk about the specific names of the NCERT sections that we are going to cover, then obviously we will see the 9.3.3, which is isomerism. Then after, we will see the problem 9.9 to 9.11 from the NCERT book. After that, we will have a quick short summary of the topics that we have discussed today in today's class, right? So here we are starting with the topic of structural isomerism in hydrocarbon. Structural isomerism refer to compounds that have the same molecular formula but difference in the arrangement of atoms within the molecule. So this is an important concept in organic chemistry as it explains how molecules with the same number of atoms can have different properties. Now we see that the structural isomers are specifically alkenes that share the same molecular formula but have different structural arrangement. This means that even though they have the same type and same number of atoms, the way these atoms are connected are different. So this is the definition in accordance to our discussion that alkenes with the same molecular formula but different structural arrangement of atoms are called as structural isomers. So the image here likely represents the examples of structural isomers, showing how the same molecular formula can result in two different structures. Here we can see that the two structures are but1-ene and but2-ene. Okay, sorry, 2-methyl-prop-1-ene. Even though the number of carbon and hydrogen atoms are same, the difference is in their connectivity. You can quickly see that the longest chain in the first case is of 4 carbon and in the second case is of 3 carbon, and the extra carbon of the fourth length is going on to the branching in the second image. Okay, now what is the molecular formula? The molecular formula is C4H8, so 4 carbons and 8 hydrogens. Now this clarifies that above given two structures are structural isomers because they have the same molecular formula but different connectivity of carbon. Now as a result of this different connectivity, despite having the same molecular formula, they exhibit different physical and chemical properties. So this highlights the significance of structural isomers as it affects how substances behave and interact in various environments. Now we will explore the different types of structural isomerism that alkenes can exhibit. Alkenes can show three types of structural isomerism. So the first one is the chain isomerism. Chain isomerism, when the carbon atoms in the alkenes are arranged in different branching patterns. This means that even though the molecular formula remain the same, the structure of the carbon chain can vary, leading to different compounds. The next type of structural isomerism is position isomerism. Position isomerism happens when the functional group, in this case the double bond in alkenes, is located at different positions along the carbon chain. This can result in different physical and chemical properties for the isomers. Lastly, we have the ring chain isomerism. This type of isomerism occurs when one isomer has a ring structure while another one has an open chain structure. This can significantly affect the properties and reactivity of the compound. So starting with the first one, which is chain isomerism in alkene. Chain isomerism occurs when compound have the same molecular formula, so that is the precondition for every isomerism. But what is the difference? The difference is that they have different chain length. Okay, so the chain isomers have different chain length. Now the carbon atoms arranged in chain are of different length, means the principal chain is changing. So there can be a scene that your one isomer is a straight one and the other one is a branched one. Okay, or the third one can be of two different type of branching. Now we can take that same example of but1-ene and 2-methyl-prop-1-ene. Here you can clearly say that the chain length is changing. okay, the word root which is decided by the chain length, so that is also changing along with the change in chain length, okay. Here again the molecular formula for both were C4H8, but but1-ene has 4 carbon in a row, whereas 2-methyl-prop-1-ene has 3 carbon in a row and 1 carbon as a branch. Now branching can influence again the physical properties of the compound significantly. So we will deal with this in the later on slides, and we have seen a part of it in the alkanes also, that how branching can affect the physical properties like solubility or your boiling point or your melting point. Now we are moving on to the position isomer in the hydrocarbon. So this is the isomer which is showing the change in the position of the double bond. So what we can say about position isomers? They are the alkenes with the same carbon arrangement but different position of double bond, means their backbone remains same, okay, the carbon's backbone remains the same, only the location of double bond changes. Here is an example of that. We can see two compounds given here. They are but1-ene and but2-ene. You can clearly see that their backbone is intact and it is not changing. Apart from that, the molecular formula is also same, which is C4H8. But what has been changed? Now both compounds have the same carbon chain length, but in but1-ene, the double bond is between the first carbon and the second carbon atom. So this is a clear example how the position of the double bond can define the isomer. Whereas in the second one, which is but2-ene, the double bond is between the second and third carbon. Therefore, it is illustrating that the concept of position isomers, how a simple shift in the double bond position can create different isomers of the same molecular formula C4H8. Now moving on to the ring chain isomerism. So this is the isomerism that can be exhibited by those compounds which can exist in a ring structure as well as a open structure. So let us look at the definition of ring chain isomers. These are compounds that can exist in both an open chain and in a cyclic form while having the same molecular formula. This is an interesting aspect of your organic chemistry that shows the versatility of your carbon compound. So ring chain isomers are compounds that can exhibit that can exist as both as an open chain alkene and a cyclic alkene sharing the same molecular formula. So we have taken that same example of but1-ene, and you can see how this but1-ene can also be drawn in a different arrangement where we are having a cycle. Now both have the same molecular formula, which is C4H8, means there are 4 carbons and 8 hydrogen, but the structures are different, leading to different properties. So but1-ene has a double bond between carbon 1 and carbon 2, and it has a chain length of 4 carbon, okay. Now next, when I talk about the cyclobutane is creating a cyclic ring. So its name is coming from there, which is cyclo, okay. Now the chain length is same here, but the connectivity is different. So 1 and 4 are now joined together. Rather than a double bond, now we have a ring, okay. Now we are starting our discussion on stereoisomerism. So we have talked about structural isomerism, about the 3 structural isomerism. First is chain, second is position, and the third is ring chain, okay. Now the second type of isomerism is stereoisomerism. It is a fascinating aspect of chemistry that deals with the spatial arrangement of atoms in the molecules. Now let us introduce the term stereoisomers. So the compound having the same molecular formula but a different spatial arrangement. Remember, in this type of isomers, the connectivity of atom will not change, okay. So this is very important to remember. In stereoisomers, the connectivity of atom is same, only the spatial arrangement, means how the molecules are pointing in the open space, that thing is changing. So we can say that the stereoisomers differ in spatial arrangement. This means that even though the atoms are connected in the same way, their 3-dimensional orientation in space is different. Moving on, we have learned that the alkenes, which are hydrocarbons that have at least 1 carbon double bond, now they can exhibit isomerism. So this is an important property that affects their chemical behavior and application. Now, what is the type of isomerism, which is stereoisomerism, which is shown by alkenes? So, your stereoisomerism, which is shown by alkene, is geometrical isomerism, also refers to as cis-trans isomerism. So, this type of isomerism is crucial in understanding the properties of different alkene compounds. And geometrical isomerism arises from the relative position of the groups attached to the carbon atom of the double bond. So, this spatial difference can lead to distinct physical and chemical properties. So, here is a image illustrating this geometrical isomerism. This visual representation helps us to understand how different spatial arrangement of atom can lead to different isomer. Even though the molecular formula remain the same, the connectivity remain the same. Here in this image, we can observe the black balls are representing the carbon and other color balls are representing the groups. In the first structure, the green and orange are on the same side. You can look here very clearly that green and orange are on the same side. While in the second structure, these two are on the opposite sides to each other. Same as in the first, blue and pink are on the same side, while in the second structure, both are in the opposite side. This shows your different spatial arrangement. Now, we will look at the reason of why alkenes can show geometrical isomerism. This is an interesting aspect of alkenes that sets them apart from other hydrocarbons. Now, let us look at the reason for geometrical isomerism in alkane. It involves the restricted rotation around the carbon-carbon double bond. So, here we see that a carbon-carbon double bond is made up of sigma bond and a pi bond. A sigma bond is like a strong handshake holding the atoms together, while the pi bond adds as an extra layer of connection. So, this pi bond is crucial because it is the one which is preventing free rotation of the two carbon atoms. Now, this was possible in the case of alkanes, and due to that, we can see conformations. Okay, so we have seen in case of alkanes that the free rotation is allowed around single bond, and that creates different conformers. But due to the presence of pi bond in case of alkane, this free rotation is now restricted. Okay, and this leads to the geometrical isomerism basically. So, here is an image illustrating what happens when rotation occurs around the bond axis. Notice how the pi bond has to break, because for pi bond to exist, your both p orbital should be parallel to each other. But when you are rotating one of the carbon, the both p orbital are now not parallel to each other, and in this condition specifically, they are perpendicular to each other, which is a inappropriate condition for sidewise overlap, and hence you are kind of breaking the bond in rotating the molecule. So, what we can conclude, this visual representation is clearly telling us that if we try to rotate it, it will stop at a point due to kind of double bond. So, you can think of it in the same way. So, take an example from your home. Take two balls, right, of thermocols or of plastic, and connect them with a single rod. Okay, first thing. Second one, you take another two balls and connect them with two sticks in this time. Okay, so first one, in the first case you are connecting it with the single stick, in the second case you are connecting it with two sticks. Now, if you take the first case where the connection is with the one stick only and you try to rotate the ball, you will see that there is no problem in that. But if you try to do the same thing with the balls connected by two sticks, then in that case the rotation will be restricted. You have to kind of break one of the stick to do the rotation. So, here that stick is your bond. Okay, so basically your two bonds are kind of acting as a resistance for rotation. Now, due to this, geometrical isomers arises in the case of your alkenes. So, we have already seen that the geometrical isomerism is occurring due to the restricted rotation around the double bond. This means that the groups attached to the double bonded carbon cannot rotate freely. The next point explains the pi bond in the double bond locks the substituent positions, keeping the groups fixed in their position. So, this is crucial for understanding why geometrical isomers exist. And this restricted and fixed position gives different spatial arrangement called as geometrical isomers. Now, we have an image that illustrates the geometrical isomerism. Take a moment to observe the different arrangement of the groups around the double bond. Both have the same molecular formula, which is C4H8. Despite having the same formula, their spatial arrangement is different, which is making them distinct isomers. Now, they will also show different reactivities due to different connectivity. The first factor affecting reactivity is steric hindrance. So, this refers to physical obstruction by the size and group of the and position of the group within the molecule. The next is stability. The arrangement of atom can also influence how stable a molecule is affecting its reactivity. Finally, polarity plays a key role in the reactivity. So, the spatial arrangement can lead to difference in how the electrons are distributed, impacting the molecule's polarity and interaction. If you look at the image here, then you can clearly see that two CH3 groups are on the same side in the first case. On the second case, they are on the opposite side. So, their spatial arrangement has changed. Let us continue with the topic of geometrical isomerism. Now, what is the condition for geometrical isomerism to be present in a given alkane? How you will check that the given alkane can show geometrical isomerism or not? Now, it's very simple. For this type of isomerism to occur, each carbon atom involved in the double bond must have two different substituents. This means that the group attached to each carbon atom in the double bond must not be identical. Here we have an example illustrating the condition for geometrical isomerism. The image shows a double bond where each carbon atom has two different groups attached. This arrangement allows for the free existence of geometrical isomerism, which can be visualized as different spatial arrangement of the same molecule. So, basically, if you are considering the first carbon on the left hand side, then the two groups which are attached are A and B. Now, they cannot be same. Okay. And similarly, C and D also cannot be same. Then and then only the given alkene can show geometrical isomerism. So, if any carbon of the double bond has two identical groups, then the geometrical isomerism is not shown by that specific alkene. This is because identical groups do not allow for different spatial arrangement, thus preventing the formation of isomerism. Remember, this is a very key point to remember when identifying the potential geometrical isomerism in alkanes. Now, let us look at the different kinds of geometrical isomers. So, the first one is cis isomer. The first type of geometrical isomer is cis isomers. In this, what happens? One of the two main types of isomer will be explored. Second is trans isomer. Now, this is a quick image to show that how two isomers are different, the cis and trans. I hope you can clearly notice some difference which is occurring in both the cases. If you consider it for the cis isomer, then the identical groups like your X and X are on the same side of the double bond. Now, they are generally, what about its characteristics? So, it is generally more polar and hence they have higher boiling point. What about trans isomers? So, trans isomers have similar or identical group on the opposite side of the double bond. For example, if you look at the image, X and X are on the opposite side. Now, continuing with the topic of geometrical isomerism, you have seen that different arrangement can cause variations in properties such as melting point, boiling point and dipole moment. This is important because it affects how a substrate behave in different conditions. For example, we are taking but2ene to exhibit this change in physical and chemical properties. Now, we have two structures given here for but2ene, which is cis but2ene and trans but2ene. Your cis but2ene, if you consider both CH3 group are present on the same side of the carbon double bond. Now, this arrangement affects the molecule's properties. What are this property? So, if you consider the dipole moment, it is 0.33 dBi, making it more polar. This means it has a slightly higher charge separation, which can influence how it interacts with other molecule. Then after, if you consider the trans but2ene, then in this case, CH3 are present on opposite sides of the double bond, which changes its property. The trans but2ene is almost non-polar because the methyl groups are on the opposite sides, which cancels out the dipole moment. This means it has little to no charge separation affecting its interaction with other substances. Now, moving on further, we have a question here. So you have to do the question number 9.9, which says that write structures and IPSC names of different structural isomers of alkenes corresponding to C5H10. Let us have a look on the solution. Now we begin with the solution by identifying the possible chain lengths that can contain a double bond. This is the first step in determining the structural isomers of the alkane for the given molecular formula. C5H10 can form alkene with straight chain of 5 carbon known as pent-ene. Okay, the structure of pent-1-ene is shown here, where the double bond is between the first and second carbon atom. So this is one of the simplest form of alkenes we can have with 5 carbon atoms. Next, what we can do, we have C5H10 but with a branched chain, okay, with 4 carbon atom and 1 methyl group as a branch, known as the methyl butene. The structure for 2-methyl-but1 is illustrated here, showing how branching can create different isomers. Now moving on further, what we can say next, continuing with the solution. Now we see the second step in solving the problem. For a 5 carbon chain, the double bond can be placed in different positions. This is important because the position of the double bond affects the name and properties of alkenes. So if you are changing the position, the first structural isomer revealed is pent-1-ene. So this is the starting one. This structure has the double bond between the first and second carbon atom. The name pent-1-ene indicates a 5 carbon chain with a double bond starting at the first carbon. The next isomer shown is pent-2-ene. Here the double bond is between the second and third carbon atoms. The name pent-2-ene reflects the position of the double bond, which is crucial for distinguishing between different isomers. Continuing further. So we are done with the position isomers for the first case. For 4 carbon chain, the double bond and methyl group can occupy different positions. This is an important step because the position of double bond and any branching can lead to different isomers, each with its own unique name and structure. Here is the starting one, which is 2-methyl-but1-ene. The compound has 4 carbon chain with a double bond starting at the first carbon and a methyl group attached to the second carbon. This arrangement gives it a distinct structure and name. Now we have another isomer, which is 2-methyl-but2-ene. In this structure, the double bond is between the second carbon and the third carbon atom, and the methyl group is also attached to the same second carbon where a double bond is there. Okay, this slight change in the position of the double bond can create a different isomer with a different name. Next, continuing with the solution, what we can say, the third one which we can have with the same molecular formula C5H10 is 3-methyl-but1-ene. This is an alkene where the longest carbon chain has 4 carbon atoms and there is a methyl group attached to the third carbon. Okay, the double bond is between the first and second carbon. This is a great example of how branching and the position of double bond can create different isomers. Here comes the next question, which is to draw cis and trans isomer for the given compound for first and second, and you have also to write the IUPAC names structure that are given to us. Let us have a look onto the solution. We are focusing on the first compound, which is CHCl, double bond CHCl. The image is now visible, which shows the structural representation of the cis and trans isomer for the compound CHCl, double bond CHCl. This diagram will help us visualize how atoms are arranged differently in each isomer. Name of the cis isomer of the compound is cis-1,2-dichloroethane. In this isomer, both chlorine atoms are on the same side of the double bond. This arrangement can affect the compound's physical properties like boiling point. And the name of the trans isomer is trans-1,2-dichloroethane. In this isomer, the chlorine atom are on opposite side of the double bond. This different arrangement can lead to a different chemical property compared to the cis isomer. Continuing further, what we can say, now we are moving on to the second compound, which is C2H5CCH3 double bond CCH3C2H5, which we will explore the cis and trans isomer. Remember, the arrangement of groups can around the double bond determine whether it is a cis or trans isomer. Here we have an image that visually represents the cis and trans isomer of the second compound. Take a moment to observe how the groups are arranged around the double bond in each isomer. This visual will help us to understand the structure structural difference between the two isomers. Name of the cis isomer is cis 3,4-dimethyl hexthreene. This indicates that both C2H5 group are on the same side of the double bond. This arrangement is what defines the cis configuration. Now we have the name trans isomer, trans 3,4-dimethyl hexthreene. In this configuration, the C2H5 group are on opposite side of the double bond. This opposite arrangement is characteristics of the trans configuration. Here comes the next question. Which of the following compound will show cis-trans isomerism? Options are given and we have to choose the right one. We have 4 compounds listed here. We will analyze each one to see if they meet the criteria for cis-trans isomerism or not. Now, we see the structure of the first compound, which is CH3 whole twice C double bond CH C2H5. This visual representation helps us determine if the compound can exhibit cis-trans isomers or not. Looking at the group attached to the double bonded carbon. For a compound to show cis-trans isomerism, it must have different groups attached to each carbon of the double bond. This is a key requirement because it allows for the different spatial arrangement that defines cis and trans isomers. But as you can see in the structure, carbon 1 has 2 identical groups. So this compound does not fulfill the condition required to show the cis-trans isomerism. We have 4 compounds listed. We will analyze each one to see if they meet the cis-trans isomerism or not. Okay, so we have identified the first one. It will not show cis-trans isomerism because the first carbon has 2 identical methyl groups. So we can conclude that it is not capable of showing cis-trans isomerism. Moving on further, continuing with the second option. So this is your second option, which is CH2 double bond CBr2. This visual again clearly shows us that the given compound is not capable of showing cis-trans isomerism. Let's see why. Because it has 2 hydrogen atom and carbon number 1, and the carbon number 2 has 2 bromine atoms. Having identical groups on each carbon prevents the cis-trans isomerism. Therefore, we can conclude that this is also not the correct answer. Moving on further, what is the next compound? Next is C6H5 CH double bond CH single bond CH3. Each carbon atom has 2 different groups attached to it. This allows for 2 possible configurations: cis group on the same side and trans group on the opposite side. The compound therefore can show cis and trans isomerism. So if I ask you that if it will show cis trans or not, you will tell yes. Now you will say that how you will decide cis and trans? Question arises. So I will say that it is not for your standards right now. We will study that how this given compound is capable of showing cis and trans isomerism. I would say how you would identify the cis and trans isomerism. But at this point, you can only say that this is capable of showing cis trans isomerism because both groups are not same in either of the doubly bonded carbon. Moving on further, what is the fourth option? But the fourth option is CH3CH double bond CCl CH3. Now each carbon atom has 2 different groups attached to it, which fulfills the requirement for cis-trans isomerism. Therefore, this compound can also show cis-trans isomerism. So we can conclude that the third and fourth are capable of showing cis-trans isomerism. Now let us have a quick short summary of the topics that we have learned in this class so far. First is the structural isomerism, which have the same molecular formula but different structural arrangement of atoms. Here in this we have the first case where the chain length can vary. This is because the backbone of the carbon chain is changing. Next, if the backbone is not changing, then the position of the double bond can change, and that can result in position isomerism. Last one is ring chain isomerism, in which your alkene can be converted to double bond. You can try with any example and you will see it clearly that your alkene is capable of showing the cyclic chain. Okay, given that your alkene should be at least of chain length 3. Next we have stereoisomerism. So these are also the stereoisomerism which is shown by your alkene is geometrical isomerism or cis-trans isomerism. Now it is occurring due to the restricted rotation between the carbon-carbon double bond because the extra pi bond is creating a resistance for the rotation. What is the requirement of a compound or a alkene to show geometrical isomerism, in that your each carbon should have two different groups, then and then only your double bonded carbon can show cis trans isomerism. Moving on to the type of geometrical isomers. So we can have a cis isomer in which the similar groups are on the same side. Okay, so there are cases in which your compound can show cis and trans isomer, but you cannot assign them or designate them the cis and trans property, but you will learn them in the higher classes. Again, your trans isomer, if I say, so they in this the groups are present on the opposite side. Now moving on further, if you take butene, then butene can exist in cis form where the dipole moment is 0.33. So you can remember that the cis form has a isomer, has a dipole moment, whereas the trans form has near to zero polarity. Next, we have physical and chemical properties. So they have different melting points, your cis and trans, and they have different boiling points and different dipole moment. So these three things are different in case of your cis and trans. Similarly, they will show different reactivity due to the different steric effect. This was all for today's class. Thank you for your attention.